Hello and welcome to the channel. In today's video I would like to make a very special edition for International Women's Day, and I wanted to briefly take a look at some of the contributions of women in the watchmaking industry in the 19th century. And this is no small feat, as we find these women who were engaged in various sections of watchmaking, and this was extremely important in the development of this burgeoning watch industry in Switzerland. So if we look, for example, at the first case where we're dealing with this contribution of women in watchmaking, I did want to point out that, of course, we have the flagship of the Montandon watch dynasty. This is Montandon Frères local, Montandon brothers. Now there was a series of workshops or ateliers that were run by women, and this was Montandon Soeurs. And Montandon Soeurs, Montandon sisters, they were generally working with finissage, finishing works for watchmaking, or as pierristes. This is either stone fitters or stone cutters. Also various other very fine detailed work, such as débris, and this was very small detailed watch parts. So we will find them making screws and various very fine elements within the watches. So we have these extremely refined arts that they were practicing for these very delicate tasks. So there also tended to be in the dial painting and the decoration of watch dials. And this is also a very important factor, as watch dials in Switzerland up until the early 1890s were primarily hand painted. So it wasn't until roughly the early mid 1890s where the photochemical processes came in to use, and slowly this hand painted dials fell out of favor. And yet by the early 20th century we do find women still painting. However, this is more with regards to radium, and this was a very hazardous profession, where we would find that women decorating the actual watch hands with this glow-in-the-dark radium paint. And indeed this was later understood to be quite harmful, as they would tend to put the paintbrush into their mouth in between the painting, and this of course led to a very bad deterioration in the jawline with this radioactive material. So we do have these various different professions that were populated by women. We should also remember polisseuse. This is a woman who was polishing the watches, and they could also be regulating watches instead of as a regulateur or régulatrice. And this was, once again, women tended to be used in these various, very high motor dexterous tasks of the watchmaking. They had a very successful application of these skills. And if you were within a family making watches, and each member of the family was participating in one aspect of the watch production, then often women would be doing these highly motor skilled techniques. But Montandon Soeurs, these ateliers, in the very beginning, in the 1790s, we find them generally still in textile production, but they would move into this watchmaking, these various specified tasks or specialized tasks in watchmaking, and they excelled at this. And certainly by the mid 19th century, we see these. Now this Montandon Soeurs, it was essentially a series of non-related watch ateliers, but as the ones died out, other ones also utilized this appellation, and these would have been subcontractors, for example, to Montandon Soeurs, where we find them either in the same buildings as Montandon Soeurs or in close proximity on Rue de la Côte. But they later also, in the 1890s and after the 20th century, we find them in La Chaux-de-Fonds for this very specialized watch part production, and these services such as polishing, etc. Now, there is another interesting aspect for this women in watchmaking, and that is we do find a very successful company in Geneva that was actually fabricating spiraux, and this is the hairsprings of watches. And indeed, this firm was called L. Montandon-Lutz et Compagnie, and it was located in Geneva. And one generally assumes that this L, it's a Louis of some kind. This is indeed not the case. This was Louise. So this was the widow of a watchmaker who began this business, and after he passed away, Louise continued this business very successfully, and this came to have over 10 gold medals in these various expositions for their watch springs. And I believe they even far surpassed that in the years after we find this notification that they had 10 honorable awards, including 9 gold and 1 recollection where they recall it's a rappel. So they're recalling a previous victory, or basically giving them this high status as a top-tier manufacturer. But this is very fascinating that we find a woman director of a very successful company. Now, later, this would go to her son, and he would take over after her death. And he continued with this business until eventually it went to a larger consortium, and it basically became part of that consortium. And this was already into the right before the turn of the century, of the 20th century. But this was a very successful company. It is an example of this, of a woman leading a Geneva-based Swiss hairspring factory. Now they had, I believe they had over 40 workers, and they had steam engine equipment. So this was a very highly advanced organization, and we find them at all of the expos, including in the United States, in Australia, Europe indeed. So they had a very favorable reputation, and they can be seen taking these awards because of the quality of their products. But this was just a really short honorary video on International Women's Day to point out some of the achievements in watchmaking by women and the prominent roles that they occupied. But one must note that this is mainly, we find these women as really the backbone of the watchmaking, because without them, these watches would have certainly suffered. They were able to apply their abilities and their high motor dexter skills in order to produce this high level of quality in Swiss watchmaking. So I hope this was informative, and I also hope that this brings to light the contributions of these women in this Swiss watchmaking, which we should be grateful for their participation. But thank you, and I wish you a very nice week. Bye-bye.